Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Monday, 11th August 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China navigates a complex landscape of economic, technological, and geopolitical challenges and opportunities. President Donald Trump has repeatedly extended a tariff truce with China for 90 days, hoping to resolve trade differences and potentially leading to a summit between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. However, the possibility of tariffs on Chinese purchases of Russian oil remains an option. These tariffs, alongside existing trade tensions, are straining China's home appliance industry by disrupting global supply chains and weakening demand. Despite these challenges, Chinese automakers are utilizing the Red Sea and Suez Canal to access European markets, even amidst regional security concerns. China is actively working to strengthen trade ties with Southeast Asia, including a major port upgrade in Brunei. Economist Wang Yiming has urged Chinese officials to curb excessive cash burn in competition among e-commerce platforms, supporting new growth drivers in the instant retail market. In technology, Huawei Technologies is poised to unveil a breakthrough that could reduce China's reliance on high-bandwidth memory, HBM, chips for AI. Chinese scientists have also revealed a projectile launcher for removing space debris, although it has potential weapon applications. Contemporary Amperex technology suspension of production at a lithium mine signals Beijing's efforts to curb overcapacity in the EV battery sector. To stabilize housing prices, Beijing has lifted home purchase restrictions in outlying areas, a move that other major cities might emulate. China's military capabilities are being showcased through the Winglong 2 WL2 drone, which is being used in live-fire exercises around Taiwan and patrols in the South China Sea. Footage of the DF-100 supersonic cruise missile has been released, potentially serving as a deterrent for U.S. warships and military bases in the region. In the South China Sea, the Chinese Coast Guard reported expelling Philippine vessels from a contested area, while Manila claimed a collision occurred, damaging one Philippine vessel. Domestically, Liu Jiankao, a key figure in the Chinese Communist Party's international department, has been detained for unclear reasons, raising questions about China's foreign policy direction. Ethical concerns have arisen regarding China's 12-year-old swimmer, cede, due to her young age and high-level competition. Additionally, Shaolin Temple Abbot Shi Yongxin is under investigation for alleged financial offenses and sexual misconduct. China has condemned Israel's plan to take control of Gaza City, calling for an immediate halt to military operations. The United States has been actively managing its trade relationship with China, primarily through tariffs and export controls. President Donald Trump has repeatedly delayed implementing tariff hikes on Chinese goods by 90 days to allow for further negotiation. This extension of a tariff truce aims to avert a trade showdown and potentially facilitate a summit between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. However, the possibility of tariffs on Chinese purchases of Russian oil remains under consideration. The U.S. and China clashed over the Panama Canal at the United Nations, with the U.S. expressing concerns about Beijing's influence over the key waterway. The Trump administration had previously pressured China to have the Hong Kong-based operator of ports at either end of the Panama Canal sell those interests to a U.S. consortium. The U.S. government has also been focused on regulating the export of advanced technology to China. NVIDIA and AMD have agreed to share 15% of their revenues from chip sales to China with the U.S. government to secure export licenses. President Trump personally negotiated a deal with NVIDIA, allowing the company to sell a less powerful version of its AI chips in China, in exchange for a portion of the sales revenue. However, U.S. chip giant NVIDIA faces increasing mistrust in China over its H20 chips, even with the export license. Elsewhere around the globe, in Brazil, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has reinforced ties with China, Brazil's largest trading partner, while addressing a trade disruption with the United States. In the Cook Islands, the Chinese ambassador to New Zealand has stated that the comprehensive strategic partnership between the Cook Islands and China is unrelated to military or security agendas. Hong Kong's Eddie Yue, chief executive of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, has cautioned that the speculative bubble around stablecoins merits regulatory scrutiny. Israel's plan to take control of Gaza City has been condemned by China, urging an immediate halt to military operations in an emergency United Nations Security Council session on Sunday. In Japan, South Korea continues to suspend imports of fishery products from 8 prefectures following the 2011 Fukushima nuclear power plant meltdown. Koizumi presses Seoul to lift the fishery curbs. New Zealand's Chinese ambassador stated that the comprehensive strategic partnership between the Cook Islands and China is unrelated to military or security agendas. In the Philippines, China's Coast Guard said Monday that it took necessary measures to expel Philippine vessels from a contested feature in the South China Sea, while Manila claimed 2 Chinese vessels collided during the operation, leaving one heavily damaged. Israel's ongoing conflict with Hamas continues to escalate, leading to a dire humanitarian crisis within Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the situation faces increasing criticism, including from French President Emmanuel Macron, who fears a looming disaster impacting both Israeli hostages and the Gazan population. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has also weighed in, accusing Netanyahu of being in denial about the severity of the humanitarian crisis. The Health Ministry in Hamas-run Gaza reports at least 61,199 Palestinian deaths, figures the United Nations deems reliable. Airstrikes have intensified, particularly around Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Concerns are mounting regarding Israel's narrative control, with accusations of silencing Palestinian journalists and influencers who document alleged war crimes. Adding to the tensions, an Israeli airstrike resulted in the death of Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif, 28, along with his colleagues Mohammed Kreike and camera operators Ibrahim Zaher, Mohammed Nufal, and Momin Aliwa, and others sheltering outside the Gaza City Hospital complex. The attack, which struck a tent used by journalists near Al-Shifa Hospital, has been denounced by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, Reporters Without Borders, and various media rights organizations as a serious violation of international humanitarian law, accusing Israel of deliberately targeting journalists. While Israel claims al-Sharif was a Hamas operative, a claim he denied, the incident has sparked global outrage. Mourners in Gaza City paraded the journalists' bodies, and Al Jazeera observed a moment of silence in their honor. This event has further strained relations between Israel and Qatar, the latter being a supporter of Al Jazeera and a host to Hamas leaders, a relationship marked by both open animosity and covert cooperation. Critics also allege Israel is inducing starvation to cause malnutrition and intentionally targeting journalists. In India, the Israeli military campaign in Gaza has prompted condemnation from opposition members of parliament who are suggesting the reactivation of the India-Palestine Committee within the Indian parliament. United States President Donald Trump's administration has initiated artificial intelligence chip export licenses following a revenue-sharing deal, despite existing security concerns. The U.S. government has extended the tariff truce with China by 90 days, with Trump acknowledging Beijing's progress on trade imbalances and security concerns. However, Trump also imposed a 100% tariff on semiconductor and chip imports, causing concern but also relief in some markets. Additional tariffs have been threatened on Russia and its trading partners, while India and Brazil face increased tariffs, with Brazilian goods tariffs recently rising to 50%. Trump is also considering an unspecified reclassification, and his nomination follows the firing of an agency head, raising questions about the integrity of US government statistics. A meeting is scheduled between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, with Trump setting a low bar for the summit and stating his willingness to walk away if no agreement is reached, causing Ukraine to fear that Russia will try to convince Trump that Ukraine is the obstacle to peace. Trump has also taken control of Washington, D.C.'s police force and deployed the National Guard, a move criticized as authoritarian. The president has promised a crackdown on crime and homelessness in Washington, D.C. Finally, the U.S. is seeking closer ties with the Pakistani government. The Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, with a Russian official reporting a Ukrainian drone attack that killed 1 and wounded 2 in Russia's Nizhny Novgorod region. Ukraine and its European backers insist the US and Russia cannot decide on land swaps behind their backs at the upcoming Alaska summit. Russia has repeatedly targeted soldiers assembled at military academies, barracks, and parade grounds, resulting in the deaths of foreign recruits in the Ukrainian military. Sunwood Intelligent Equipment Company Limited, a Chinese construction equipment manufacturer, received an insurance payout for 3 aircraft stranded in Russia since the conflict began. Regarding China, the U.S.'s tariff truce extension is based on acknowledged progress by Beijing in addressing trade imbalances and economic national security concerns. Morgan Stanley predicts continued foreign inflows to Chinese stocks after the summer, citing regulatory efforts to boost shareholder returns, attractive valuations, and rising expectations of US interest rate cuts. Shifting focus to Syria, a U.S. congressman visited to discuss with the country's interim president the return of the body of an American aid worker who was taken hostage and later confirmed dead. Finally, in Austin, a deadly attack occurred at a popular store in the state capital, with victims not yet identified. Separately, in Puerto Rico, a 25-year-old man from Queens was fatally shot while visiting to see Bad Bunny in concert. India is grappling with a Supreme Court order to remove stray dogs from Delhi due to rising attacks, sparking conflict between public safety advocates and animal rights groups. The court mandated sterilization and relocation of the dogs to shelters. Politically, opposition parties have protested against alleged voter list manipulation, particularly in poorer states, where elections are scheduled for November, leading to arrests of opposition lawmakers. Economically, India faces potential impacts on its textile, jewelry, and auto parts industries from possible 50% tariffs. Its ethanol production is creating a surplus of protein-rich byproduct, affecting animal feed and potentially hindering edible oil self-sufficiency. A government advisory on the fat and sugar content in snacks has been seen as an attack on street food. Internationally, relations between India and the United States under President Trump are reportedly strained due to trade issues with Russia, and recent failed trade negotiations expose the limits of India's leverage. India is also boosting its military with an $8.7 billion USD defense package in response to clashes with Pakistan. In Pakistan, Army Chief Asim Munir has repeated anti-India rhetoric, referring to Kashmir as Pakistan's jugular vein during an address to the Pakistani diaspora in Tampa, Florida. Munir was also quoted stating, "We are a nuclear nation. If we think we are going down, we'll take half the world down with us." Australia's Reserve Bank reduced the official cash rate to 3.6%, the third cut this year, potentially saving a $500,000 mortgage holder $74 a month. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese stated he told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that he is in denial regarding the suffering in Gaza, citing the Netanyahu government's resistance to listening to allies as a factor in Australia's decision to recognize a Palestinian state at the upcoming United Nations General Assembly session, joining France, Britain, and Canada. Sydney experienced its wettest start to August in decades, exceeding double the monthly average rainfall in the first 11 days, with predictions of a wetter spring for eastern New South Wales. A toxic algae bloom continues off the south coast, killing hundreds of marine species and disrupting fisheries. NSW Independent MP Alex Greenwich is suing former federal Labour leader Mark Latham for homosexual vilification and workplace harassment, alleging an abusive obsession that has exposed him to hatred and ridicule. Following Kettle's shutdown of one of the world's largest lithium mines, Tianqi Lithium's stock in Hong Kong increased as much as 19%, while Ganfeng Lithium Group surged 21%, and Australian miners also experienced gains. Australia and India are collaborating on rare earth initiatives. United Kingdom authorities have assured EU citizens awaiting a decision on their pre-Brexit residency status that they will not be removed from the country for short trips abroad for business, leisure, or family reasons. The Independent Monitoring Authority for Citizens Rights Agreements, IMA, had raised concerns with the Home Office on this issue. David Lammy may face legal action over a plan to invite staff from Shell and BAE Systems to work within the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, sparking worries about conflicts of interest. Several arrests were made recently of individuals carrying signs supporting a pro-Palestinian group that the UK has banned as a terrorist organization. Turning to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, US President Donald Trump stated that both Kyiv and Moscow would need to cede land to end the war, confirming plans to discuss land swapping with Russian President Vladimir Putin at a summit in Alaska. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed frustration with Trump's conditions for any peace deal, including a national referendum. Zelensky does not believe that Putin is preparing for a ceasefire or an end to the war. Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines are skeptical that peace talks can end the war. Zelensky acknowledged India's support for peace efforts, but emphasized the need to halt Russia's energy exports to create tangible leverage. German Chancellor Merz has invited Trump and Zelensky to a virtual meeting before the Trump-Putin summit. Kyiv is concerned that Trump's vision of a peace accord involves a direct deal between the US and Russia. Artificial intelligence is seen as a key factor for victory in the conflict. In the latest from Israel-Palestine, Oda Hathaline, a Palestinian activist, was killed in the West Bank by Yinon Levy, an extremist Jewish settler. Video footage shows Hathaline filming the moment he was shot. Levi was already under sanctions for previous violent acts against Palestinians. Philippines is experiencing heightened tensions with China in the South China Sea after a Chinese warship collided with a Chinese Coast Guard vessel. The incident occurred as the Chinese vessels pursued a Philippine patrol boat, escorting vessels delivering aid to Filipino fishers near Scarborough Shoal. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. asserted that the Philippines seeks peace but will maintain its presence in contested areas, questioning China's warning against playing with fire. Marcos Jr. acknowledged the Philippines' likely involvement in any Taiwan conflict due to proximity and the presence of Filipino workers, despite China's objections. A documentary by Baby Ruth Villarama depicting the lives of Filipino fishermen and soldiers in the South China Sea is set to premiere, despite condemnation from Beijing, which considers it rife with disinformation and false propaganda. Philippine economists and the chip industry are also concerned about the potential impact of US President Donald Trump's proposed 100% tariffs on semiconductor exports to America, warning of devastating consequences for the sector. Japan is currently contending with devastating torrential rains in southwestern regions, particularly Kyushu, causing extensive flooding and mudslides that have claimed at least 2 lives, with others still missing and prompting the highest level warning from the Japan Meteorological Agency in Kumamoto. In the wake of the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster, Japan's foreign minister has called upon South Korea to eliminate its existing restrictions on the import of Japanese seafood. The weakening yen is prompting Japanese students to pursue more budget-friendly educational opportunities in countries throughout Asia, including Taiwan, South Korea, Malaysia, and the Philippines. The Government Pension Investment Fund, GPF, is augmenting its workforce in response to its growing assets under management, despite maintaining a relatively small staff size compared to its assets. Fueled by optimism around tariffs and interest rates, Japan's Nikkei 225 stock index has reached a new record high. Japan is facing increased political uncertainty, potentially leading to extended policy stagnation and affecting the formulation of the next budget, as well as the timing of the central bank's subsequent interest rate increase. Competition for civil service jobs has hit a record low, even as women account for a record high of 47.1% of successful applicants. The documentary, The Dilemmas of Working Women, sheds light on the persistent gender inequality and the disproportionate burden of housework and childcare that women in Japan face. Controversy has erupted at the high school baseball tournament after Koryo High School withdrew following reports of the bullying of a younger teammate. The British aircraft carrier Prince of Wales has arrived in Japan for the first time, marking the second time a British aircraft carrier has docked in Japan following the HMS Queen Elizabeth's visit in 2021. Following the deaths of 2 fighters in separate boxing matches, Japanese boxing officials are convening an emergency meeting, leading to intense scrutiny of the sport within the country. Colombia mourns the loss of Senator Miguel Uribe, a 39-year-old conservative politician from the Centro Democrático Party. Uribe, a presidential hopeful for the 2026 elections, died 2 months after being shot during a campaign rally in Bogotá in June. The attack, which involved shots to his head and leg, occurred while Uribe was giving a campaign speech. The senator, grandson of a former Colombian president, had been in intensive care, briefly showing signs of improvement before his passing. Pakistan experienced disruptions as its railway system halted services to and from a southwestern province for 4 days after separatists bombed a railway track. In northern Pakistan, a large mudslide resulted in the deaths of 7 volunteers working to repair a drainage channel previously damaged by flash floods. Adding to international concerns, Azim Munir, speaking to the Pakistani diaspora in Tampa, Florida, suggested that Pakistan might resort to nuclear weapons in a future war with India if faced with an existential threat, a statement that has been met with criticism from members of the U.S. Congress, who also questioned Munir's perceived preferential treatment by the U.S. Congress. Finland has charged the captain and 2 senior officers of the Russia-linked vessel Eagle, an oil tanker, for damaging undersea cables between Finland and Estonia last year. The Eagles was detained last December. Adding a touch of cultural celebration, Finland's popular literary cartoon family, the Moomins, are celebrating their 80th anniversary this year. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung plans to meet with Donald Trump in Washington on August 25th. The discussions will likely focus on expanding cooperation in key industries. In other news, President Lee will pardon former Justice Minister Cho Kuk this week. Cho's 2-year sentence was for falsifying academic records related to his children's school admission. Meanwhile, former First Lady Kim Keon-hee appeared in court for a hearing. She could become the first ex-presidential spouse in South Korea's history jailed on criminal charges. The country also celebrated Korean Liberation Day on August 15th, commemorating freedom from Japanese colonial rule. Iran is preparing for what its foreign ministry describes as technical and complicated discussions with the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, ahead of the agency's planned visit. The IAEA has remained silent regarding the specifics of the upcoming meeting, which notably will not involve inspections of Iranian nuclear facilities. This restriction on IAEA inspections has been a recurring tactic employed by Iran to gain leverage in its negotiations with Western powers. The prospect of renewed talks between Tehran and Washington concerning a potential agreement on Iran's nuclear program remains shrouded in uncertainty, with no clear timeline established. Indonesia's president-elect Prabowo Subianto met with Peru's President Dina Boluarte to discuss strengthened economic ties. Meanwhile, in Aceh province, an Islamic Sharia court delivered sentences of 80 public canings, each to 2 men convicted of same-sex acts, specifically hugging and kissing. The Indonesian government is considering a ban on Roblox, the online game creation platform, due to the education minister's concerns about potential exposure of children to violence and harmful content. Adding to national developments, Indonesia is undertaking a substantial military reorganization, including the establishment of new commands for the Army, Navy, and Air Force, which marks the most significant restructuring since the Suharto era. Malaysia is grappling with the issue of ticket scalping, with lawmakers mulling criminal penalties in response to public anger over inflated prices, such as My Chemical Romance concert tickets hitting us $940. Deputy Communications Minister Teo Nichinga stated that the government is aware of public concerns. In other news, the death of Sarah Karina Mahathir has ignited widespread protests and fueled concerns about impunity and unresolved abuse allegations. Shifting focus to the United States, a significant trial commenced on Monday, examining the Trump administration's deployment of National Guard troops for deportation support and protest suppression. Vietnam is offering compensation to thousands of villagers, which includes rice and cash payments, for land being cleared for a $1.50 billion resort with ties to the Trump family. The compensation, which can be as low as $12 per square meter, is based on the size and location of the land being acquired. The White House has stated that there is no conflict of interest involving the project. Brazil has been grappling with the challenge of regulating big tech companies. U.S. technology firms are reportedly seeking President Trump's backing to influence these emerging regulations. Across Europe, a dangerous heat wave continues to grip the continent, with Spain and Portugal bracing for temperatures as high as 44 CT. This intense heat follows weeks of consistently high temperatures, ranging from the high 30s to low 40s Celsius, increasing the risk of heat stroke and other heat-related illnesses. Simultaneously, wildfires, fueled by the extreme conditions, are tearing through various regions, threatening not only lives and property, but also a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Spain. In other news from Spain, the Football Federation has granted permission for Villarreal's La Liga match against Barcelona to be held in Miami. This decision marks a significant move towards expanding La Liga's reach into the North American market, although it has sparked debate among fans regarding the impact on traditional supporters. Ukraine is at the center of diplomatic efforts as European leaders, including those from Germany, are set to join a call between President Zelensky and Donald Trump. This follows reports of Trump's discontent with Zelensky and his push for a Zelensky-Putin meeting. The EU foreign ministers are firm. Ukraine must be involved in any peace talks arising from the planned Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. The United States sees Donald Trump reportedly voicing his frustration with Ukraine's President Zelensky. Trump has been encouraging Zelensky to engage in direct talks with Russian President Putin, with a potential peace deal involving Ukraine on the agenda for Trump's upcoming meeting with Putin in Alaska. France is currently under a red alert as extreme heat waves scorch the nation, prompting widespread concerns and safety measures. In the Middle East, specifically Gaza City, Al Jazeera journalist Anas al-Sharif has tragically died following an Israeli airstrike, sparking condemnation and raising concerns about the safety of journalists in conflict zones. Yemen's leader al-Alimi, head of the Presidential Leadership Council, met with Indian Ambassador Suhail Khan in Riyadh, highlighting the strong friendship between Yemen and India. Al-Alimi specifically praised the cooperative relationship the two nations share. France is currently battling a severe heat wave, particularly in the southwest, where temperatures have soared to 43 degrees Celsius. The extreme heat has elevated the risk of wildfires across the region. In addition to the land-based heat wave, marine heat waves are contributing to an increase in jellyfish populations, resulting in the closure of several beaches as a safety precaution. The Pacific Islands are facing a severe dengue fever outbreak, exacerbated by the climate crisis. Since the start of 2025, 16,502 confirmed cases and 17 deaths have been reported across the region. According to the World Health Organization, Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga are experiencing the highest infection rates since 2016. The current surge marks a decade high in dengue fever cases for the Pacific Islands. Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs is seeking participation in the upcoming Pacific Islands Forum (PIF) meeting. Simultaneously, Taiwan is bolstering its defense capabilities through the development of a next-generation anti-ship missile. This initiative, designed to deter China's increasing naval power, has been allocated $40 million, use $1.30 million, in funding over the next 2 years by the Defense Ministry. Singapore is currently witnessing legal proceedings against Olivia Lam, the founder of HighFlux, who stands accused of failing to disclose vital information to investors about the true financial health of her company. Meanwhile, across the region in China, SMPT, a Singaporean manufacturer specializing in semiconductor assembly and packaging equipment, has announced the closure of its Shenzhen factory, resulting in the layoff of 950 employees as it optimizes its mainland China operations. Norway's sovereign wealth fund ended its asset management contracts in Israel. This follows reports of the fund investing in an Israeli jet engine group. The group provides services to Israel's armed forces. The fund's divestment was driven by ethical concerns related to its investment policies. New Zealand is facing renewed calls to address systemic inequities to combat youth homelessness, as highlighted by a Pacific advocate. Simultaneously, Molesworth Station, initially declared free of bovine tuberculosis, TB has identified a single infected animal, causing concern despite ongoing surveillance. Cambodia has agreed with Thailand to allow ASEAN observers to monitor their shared border. This agreement aims to reinforce a fragile ceasefire. The ceasefire was established after a deadly 5-day conflict. Deep mistrust remains a significant obstacle between the two nations. This mistrust could limit ASEAN's ability to effectively mediate the situation. Italy is currently battling an intense heat wave, tragically resulting in the death of a 4-year-old child due to heat stroke. The nation has issued a red alert for several major cities, including Bologna and Florence, signaling a critical public health risk. Experts warn that a dangerous combination of climatic conditions is exacerbating the threat of wildfires across the country. In the United States, the Federal Reserve maintained its key interest rate, holding steady between 5.25% and 5.5%. This decision reflects the Fed's ongoing assessment of inflation and economic growth. Policymakers indicated a cautious approach to future rate adjustments. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is facing increased scrutiny over its handling of rising housing costs. Opposition parties are calling for more aggressive measures to address affordability. New data reveals a continued upward trend in average home prices across major cities. Meanwhile, in France, President Emmanuel Macron is pushing for reforms to the country's unemployment benefits system. The proposed changes aim to incentivize employment and reduce reliance on government assistance. Unions have voiced strong opposition, threatening potential strikes. Across the Atlantic in Brazil, debates continue regarding environmental regulations in the Amazon rainforest. President Lula da Silva is balancing economic development with conservation efforts. International pressure is mounting to strengthen protections against deforestation. Shifting focus to Australia, the government announced new investments in renewable energy projects. The initiative is part of a broader strategy to reduce carbon emissions and transition to a green economy. The plan includes funding for solar, wind, and hydrogen energy infrastructure. Myanmar faces further instability as the Arakan army vows to disrupt the upcoming elections in areas they control, posing a direct challenge to the military junta's authority and its attempts to legitimize its rule. Spain is grappling with a surge in migration as approximately 100 migrants, including children, swam from Morocco to the Spanish enclave of Ceuta. This influx has overwhelmed the reception system in Ceuta. The situation is further strained by a prior incident on July 26, where over 50 children also swam from Morocco, exacerbating the already challenging circumstances. Sudan is facing renewed violence as the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, allegedly attacked a displacement camp near El Fasher, causing the deaths of 40 individuals, according to local rights organizations. Meanwhile, in neighboring South Sudan, a woman named Joy Falatia has reported being evicted from her home, along with her 5 children, by her husband in March 2024, highlighting ongoing concerns about women's rights and domestic security within the nation. Canada's ongoing wildfire season has already become the second worst in recorded history for the country. More than 470 fires are currently classified as out of control, and scientists are attributing the intensity and duration of these fires to the effects of climate change, leading to widespread destruction, evacuations, and hazardous smoke conditions. Turning to the United States, California Governor Gavin Newsom has formally requested that President Trump halt the redistricting efforts currently underway in Texas. This request comes after Texas Democratic lawmakers successfully blocked a Republican attempt to redraw the state's congressional map. In Southeast Asia, governments are expressing satisfaction with the lower-than-anticipated US tariffs, viewing them as a diplomatic achievement. However, concerns remain that the poorest segments of the population in the region will bear a disproportionate burden from the trade conflict, potentially undermining the current sense of optimism. Meanwhile, North Korea has offered a relatively subdued response to the upcoming annual joint US-South Korean military exercises. This cautious reaction suggests a shared desire to reduce tensions in the Korean peninsula. Across the African continent, Chinese companies and miners are facing increasing security threats from armed groups. These groups are motivated by the rising global price of gold and are actively targeting gold mining operations. In the United Kingdom, a regulator has concluded an investigation into allegations against the chair of a charity, finding no evidence to support the claim. The regulator criticized all parties involved for allowing the dispute to escalate into the public domain. Papua New Guinea has reported over 31 cases of polio. The World Health Organization, WHO, noted that while no cases of paralysis have been observed, the risk of continued transmission remains a significant concern. Globally, the World Food Programme, WFP, is implementing a substantial reduction in aid, cutting assistance by 60% for the most vulnerable populations, including pregnant women and disabled individuals. In Germany, police in Berlin have arrested demonstrators protesting the Israeli assassination of Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza. Finally, in Sweden, an archaeologist spent 3 years navigating in vessels constructed like those from 1,000 years ago. This journey led to the discovery of lost sea routes and hidden trade harbors, as well as a deeper appreciation for the seamanship of the Vikings. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.